Are you there tomorrow? I'm going to do arbitration today. I need to sit down with you for about 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. This is on my retirement.
Welcome, everyone, to our 5 o'clock study session. Confirmation of a quorum, City Clerk?
Mayor Gilmore confirming a quorum.
Thank you. So we have a presentation by Project Finance Advisory Limited, also known as PFAL, regarding the International Swim Center, Community Recreation Center, and International Swimming Hall of Fame project. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. It's a great topic of discussion, and on April 4th, the council approved the agreement with PFAL, and we gave them specific charges to pursue. Number one was develop and evaluate the potential financial strategies, and also to conduct public opinion research on options developed, forming a capital campaign team to assist with the public-private corporate funding, community outreach, and also develop potential public-private partnership agreements for this potentially 171,000 square foot facility. So with that, we have PFAL with us, and of course our Director of Parks and Recreation, Jim Teixeira, is also here. Today's presentation will be led by Victoria Taylor, who's President of PFAL, and Richard Kerrigan, the project manager, is also here. So with that, with your okay, I'll invite Victoria Taylor.
Yes, please. Welcome, Victoria. Is that on? Is there a
remote, so just tell me push the slide.
Okay, great. I'll start again. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate your time to present our findings to date on the project for you. I know that you've heard about our firm, but for those who haven't, Project Finance Advisory is a specialist financial and commercial advisor to governments. We specialize in infrastructure projects and infrastructure project delivery. The work that we were selected to do involves leading a team of 10 different specialist firms and to perform a feasibility study and to evaluate delivery options for the International Swim Center, the Community Recreation Center, and the International Swimming Hall of Fame. We'll refer to it as the project throughout the presentation. So we do have quite a bit of material to get through. We'll move along relatively quickly. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a status update of our work. There is a lot that we've been able to accomplish, and just a reminder that there are no decisions that we're asking for today. This is basically just to let you know where we are and what the next steps are in our work. Because we do have quite a bit of material to get through, we would appreciate if you could hold questions until the end.
That at the end.
Thank you.
That's
I
okay.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
But what we'll do is run through the project background, run through the scope of work, the progress that we've made in our findings to date, and then explain what the next steps are in terms of our work. Get mad. Thank you. One more. Thanks. So the work that we are doing comes from quite a history of progress that's already been made in the project. So far, we've identified that the work that has been done to date has been of a very high quality. It's been very useful to us in our analysis of the project. But the project has already passed a number of meaningful milestones, including receiving city approval, completing a conceptual design, and also to pass environmental clearance. So the work that we're doing is really to move the project forward to the next stage. We are performing a number of different scopes of work within the work that we're leading. And what our objective is to develop a clear roadmap to move the project forward to implementation. And we expect to be able to deliver that to you in a report in November. But all of our work is currently underway, and we have good progress to report on all fronts. In terms of the findings that we've made so far, there's a solid project rationale and a basis for moving the project forward. We haven't identified any fatal flaws in the work that we've done. There is consistent and strong support for the project, both in the public and also among key stakeholders. There's a considerable amount of voter confidence in favor of the project and also in the work that's being performed by the Parks and Recreation Department. The project has a unique location that we think is going to be conducive to a capital campaign to help fund the project overall. And we think that there are a number of different options available to the city to help manage the risk to the city and to attract further support for the project. My colleague Richard Kerrigan is PFAL's project manager, and he'll take us through the first part of our summary.
Thank you.
Great.
Good evening.
Thank you, Tori. Pleasure to be back. So I'm just going to, next slide, just going to talk through, you've received 4 case studies as part of the supporting material. I just want to introduce some key concepts that support the case material that we sent. And the key concept here today is risk transfer. We recognize that there's a number of different ways to transfer risk from the public sector to the private sector that are tested in the market and proven to be successful. So there's a number of range of options out that the city can look to take on to actually deliver the project and manage some of the key risks. And the case studies are just examples of what those different risks are. Next slide. So just to give you a kind of a range of perspective, there's kind of one end of the spectrum, which is a design, bid, build approach. This is where the public agency designs the project, bids it out to a construction team to build it. And typically most of the risks of the project are held with the public agency. Next slide. Where the other end of the spectrum, there's actually, you can transfer a significant amount of these project risks to a private partner to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. And the important distinction is that these risks are managed over the long term. So there's actually different outcomes in terms of the asset management and performance of the asset, depending on how you structure the project. And this is some of the analysis that we're going to consider in our recommendations for this project. Next slide. So in terms of the actual 4 case studies that we looked at, again, just graphically, the projects on the far left has the highest risk to the public sector, which was the Dublin Aquatic Centre in the East Bay, which is the example we looked at. And then the 3 examples more towards the right I've actually looked to transfer risk to private sector partners, and these are projects that have been either completed or operational or under construction. So what we've done is take the lessons learned from that process and those projects and consider the unique characteristics of Santa Clara, and I look to apply that to this process. And it's also an opportunity for the city and other members to reach out to these other projects as well, to kind of hear directly from them if that's something that's of interest to you. So in terms of some of the overall case studies, there's a kind of a lot of material that we have to support this, and we recognize we have some time limitations, but We recognize that each project is unique, and we can stop for questions, as Tori mentioned at the end. But some of the key factors that influence the design or the structure that you take is the general size of the project itself. You can see here that they range from 43 million to over 500 million. The different funding sources that support the project and whether the project generates revenue. And these are some of the key characteristics that we're going to be looking at for this project, International Swim Hall of Fame, or ISC, CRC, and International Swim Hall of Fame. Next slide. And then in terms of the actual operational models, again, there's 6 examples here that we've looked at. Again, there's other case studies in the market that we've taken the lessons learned from. There are pros and cons of different operating models. Again, there's more supporting material that we have. We can get to some of the questions later, but the key point here is that there's options available that are proven and work. And what we're going to do is pick the best examples and incorporate that into this project and make that recommendation for the city's benefit. Next slide. I think this, so in terms of I think this is one we've just covered actually. Sorry. In terms of some of the due diligence that we've done, as Tori mentioned, we've reached out to a number of stakeholder groups and the City Council and Mayor in particular. And these are some of the core objectives that we've gleaned from that process so far. And also there's some constraints that we understand the city has. So just as an example, we recognize that this project needs to offer something for everyone in the community of all ages, abilities, and interests. And this is one of the key foundational objectives that we're going to take forward in our thinking and our analysis. And we also recognize that the city has limitations in terms of limited staff and financial resources to put forward to this project. So again, as this due diligence that we've done, and these are the lessons that we're going to bring into our recommendations, so that any recommendations that we do make to you are specific to the context of the Santa Clara situation. Next slide. And then, as Tori mentioned, the overall objective in November is to present a business case or recommendations to how to move the project forward into implementation. And this is going to consider a number of different elements, different revenue streams from the project that generates itself. We're going to be looking at different funding sources, both public and private. And we're going to be looking at the benefits of different delivery options in terms of how you actually deliver the project. And this is going to ultimately result in a clear roadmap forward in terms of how to actually implement the project. That, again, caters to the city's appetite. Next, we're going to move on to the public opinion research. I'm going to ask our colleague from Tulshan Research, Corey, to talk us through this element.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Corey O'Neill. I'm a vice president with Tulshan Research. We were asked to partner with PFAL on this project to provide public opinion research regarding the project, and we have done many survey research projects like this in the past, especially in the Bay Area, and we have we've gotten some positive sentiments from voters across the city for moving forward with this project. So just to give you a sense of what we did for this public opinion research survey, we conducted a survey among 500 voters in Santa Clara. The interviews were conducted towards the end of June, the 22nd through the 29th. The margin of error for this survey is 4.34%, and it was conducted using professional callers calling both landlines and cell phones. Go ahead, next slide. So just to give you a sense, we should note that the Parks Department receives strong ratings, and you should notice the top point up there, city government, you are doing very well. The city is seen very favorably among voters. Almost 2/3 approve of the job you're doing for the city, so that's good to see. Similarly, the Parks Department is also doing very well. Actually, a majority of voters strongly approve, and 86% of voters approve of the job the Parks Department is doing. So the atmosphere for what we're trying to do here is very good for moving forward. So looking at the the project itself, a broader parks measure actually pulls 15 points higher than a narrower measure that would be specific to the swim center itself. So you can see 69% of voters support a broader parks measure compared to 29% who oppose. And so the difference there being 40%. If you see on the right there, you have a more narrow swim center first proposal, which finds support from 62%. Still strong, but does not have the support of the broader parks measure that encapsulates a more community-focused endeavor for moving forward. Go ahead. We also tested some specific items to include. These are the top parks priorities based on a 1 to 10 scale and mean scores. But you can see that some of these specific items, recycled water, maintenance for keeping parks clean, providing programs and services for kids and seniors. These are all things that voters find very important and are attracted to as ways to describe this project. And we would want to convey that including a lot of these projects, these specific elements in the project work very well and are attractive to voters across the city and should be considered for moving forward. So, in summary, we would just want to say that voters have strong confidence in you as a council, as a city government, as the Parks Department, and there's strong support for moving forward with this project, especially a broader community structure. The project itself is going to attract support from over 2/3 at this point, but that is just a snapshot in time, so we want to see where we're at moving forward. The broader parks measure that focuses only on the park, has almost 2/3, but the broader parks measure has over 2/3, and the more narrower project slightly under, so we just want to keep that in mind for moving forward. And then the next steps for this project in terms of public opinion research, we want to assess a specific measure that is broader in scope and includes the more popular elements of this initial polling. The idea being that we include specific revenue vehicles and specific dollar amounts in this next round of survey research that will happen in the months ahead. And we want to include something in that measure that would provide for accountability elements, including a sunset, annual financial and performance audits, and citizens oversight committee, something that is typically done with projects and measures similar to this. So with that, I'll actually hand it off back to Richard.
Thank you. I like the tag team approach here. This is good.
It's all about teamwork. All right, here we go. I can direct my own destiny now. In terms of the outreach effort, Tori mentioned that we've started this process, and we've met with some of the key stakeholders, and this is a process that's going to be ongoing throughout our engagement, and it's really critical that we understand what key stakeholders and the community are thinking of their concerns, so again we can incorporate that into our analysis and recommendations. And there's a number of meetings that are going to be ongoing over the summer and fall period, as shown here. In terms of the actual factors that we've discovered, as I mentioned before, some critical items that are going to have to be considered. Again, one of the key ones that we thought to mention is that this product should offer something for everyone in the community of all ages, and ability was one that was key. And in terms of the feedback we got, we also, one of the key elements was about an affordable project, recognizing that it has to be affordable to the city and the community users as well. So again, this is going to be paramount in our thinking, our analysis as we move forward our recommendations. And similarly, as Corey just went through some of the items that we're going to test, more specific elements, again from the voter or from the stakeholder feedback we got in terms of looking at certain tax measures about duration or sunset terms, as well as thresholds in terms of dollar amounts. So again, it's using this feedback that we're hearing from people to actually incorporate into our analysis. So we're actually going to be data-led in terms of making our recommendations. And other elements that we're working on include actually a wider outreach program. So we have a plan in place in terms of looking at different mediums and different channels in terms of engaging with as wide a group as possible. And that's looking at developing a project website. It's the social media outlets, as well as an online survey with Open City Hall, as well as in-person public community meetings. So what we're trying to do is capture as a wide base as possible and input, and recognizing that there is potentially limitations with people being available for public in-person meetings between work schedules, school, and the rest of it. So we're trying to make it as open and as available at all times. In terms of the outreach in-person meetings, that's going to commence in the end of August into September. So we're going to hold the first 3 meetings. It's going to be open to the public. We're going to invite advance notice and council members and the mayor, open to city staff as well in terms of attending. So you're welcome to attend. We'll give due notice as to when those are going to happen, but we're going to share similar information that we've shown today and further as we develop it, so we can bring people along the process and also get their feedback, so that when we arrive at our conclusions towards the end of the year, that we've considered the community feedback appropriately. In terms of the cost estimate review, we did look at the original estimate, which was done back in 2015. And the reason we did that was to make sure that we're on a solid footing and a foundation to move forward with our plans and recommendations, and that the cost of the project is one of the key inputs. So we conducted a pretty comprehensive due diligence on the previous design that was approved, as well as the other site-specific studies and information that was developed, as Tori mentioned, over a number of years before we were brought on board. And just to, to remind that this is the same project that was approved. This hasn't changed in terms of the scope or the features. It's the same program of project that was previously approved at City Council and passed environmental clearance. So what our main focus was to look at the actual cost elements in terms of, were there any gaps in the estimate that would leave the estimate short? And we did identify a number of those gaps, which are highlighted here. And what we did is actually price those into the estimate now, so that we're making sure that we have a more complete and fuller estimate to move forward. And we looked at other things like escalation in terms of bringing it forward to appropriate time frame, recognizing that costs in the area are escalating every year, that the product is not in place or under contract. And other things we looked at in terms of the actual methodology, we identified here some elements for improvement. For example, looking at a project-specific risk assessment could give us more a clear understanding of some of those items which were itemized in the initial estimate. And then looking at some of the earlier decisions moving forward, we're going to have consider those in our analysis. So the overall conclusions is that with an estimate of construction, midpoint in construction of 2020, the estimate is about 252.7 million. And this includes owner's contingency and escalation, which the previous estimate didn't carry. So you can see how they line up. But this gives us really a solid foundation in terms of the actual project cost, and it allows us to be able to plan around a number that we're confident and have done our due diligence on. And then in terms of, again, some of the feedback we got from our outreach was looking at managing the costs and the risks with that. We recognize that's a key concern, and we've identified here some opportunities that are well known and proven in the marketplace to managing risk to project costs. Just as an example, looking at turnkey fixed price, stay certain schedules and costs. There are ways to structure contracts to help manage those costs, as well as looking at the long-term operational life cycle issues in assets, knowing that these are complicated assets and they need to be maintained over the long term to deliver the service that's needed. So there are opportunities, and we're going to present these again in our analysis further on, but just to highlight the point that there is proven solutions in the market that work to help manage some of these key risks that we've identified. In terms of the capital campaign, this is one of the key elements of our work, and Staren Bird is here in our audience here to answer any questions specific to that element. But just to kind of present the overview, this is what we're going to be doing is a feasibility study to look at the funding of potential funding for construction and the endowment elements and ongoing needed for the project, and also the actual governance structure and how those funds are managed ongoing for a project like this, as well as identify 2 or 3 major donors as a kind of catalyst to the process within the time frame. And in terms of the overall process, we've outlined a clear process that we're working closely with SVAI, the clubs, and International Swim Hall of Fame as well, to work collaboratively and coordinated to make sure the feasibility process is successful and adequately undertaken. And the current status is that we're working on marketing materials and campaign case statement, which is currently in the draft form, in terms of starting the interview process with the potential donors, and we're collating a pretty comprehensive list of candidates to interview over the next couple of months to kind of gain their appetite and interest to potentially participate in this project. So we're moving forward with that, and we'll have more to report in September timeframe when we've completed those elements. So in terms of the summary next steps, we have a lot of work to do still. We're going to be working with city staff in terms of defining some more of the specifics about risk appetite, and of course come back to City Council with some recommendations to get your direction on, as well as elements like control in terms of how much control the city wants to maintain or transfer potentially to a private partner. We're going to continue the outreach effort, as I said, across a number of different elements. We're going to continue the capital campaign work that we've already started. Again, we'll have more to report back in September. In terms of the financial analysis, we're going to be looking at the different public funding sources from different tax measures. We're going to be looking at revenue potential from the actual project itself in terms of how much that can generate. We'll be, as I said, looking at more risk elements in terms of conducting a workshop. We're going to be looking at the operations, maintenance and life cycle costs as well. So all this is going to come together in our financial analysis. And in terms of the different structuring options, we're going to look at do some legal due diligence in terms of what's possible and what sort of constraints there might be in different structures. And again, we'll report back on those elements, as well as we're going to talk to the market, make sure their appetite and interest for different options as well, so that when we make these recommendations that it's supported by the market as well as our analysis, so that when we come back with options or recommendations toward the end of this year, they're well-founded and based on not just our research, but also the market perception and input. So the next update will be in September, and then with the final report due in November this year. So with that, I think we have questions, and we're if there's any follow-up that we run out of time, we're happy to available to answer follow-on questions beyond this session as well. So with that, we can open up discussions, and there's a fuller team here as well to support if I get stuck.
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for this very extensive report. You've been working all very hard. It didn't seem like we just hired you a month or two ago. It's amazing what you've given us. It's really a lot of information to absorb, so at least we have a really good start as to, making a decision based on fact. Right. I think it's really important. But before I go to questions, there's one more presentation that needs to be made from Cynthia Owens and Kevin Moore. I'd like to get this information out, and then we can go to the questions. Sure. So thank you. So you can rest for just a minute. Cynthia, Kevin, come forward, please.
Oh, that's okay. I don't need that. First of all, I have a couple of thank yous. Thank you, Mayor Gilmore, City Council, and staff, especially the Parks and Rec Department, for your ongoing support.
And they're very popular, I see. Project. So, yes. Okay. Good people to hang out with. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I'd also like to thank the athletes and the families and coaches and staff that came out tonight in the middle of the week, in the middle of a training session, to show their support for the project. And I would like to give a shout out to one of the PFAL team members that didn't get a chance to speak tonight, but has been incredibly supportive and whose expertise has been particularly helpful to the SVAI fundraising efforts, and that is Starren Bird. Starren, thank you. Tonight, I'm up here because I'd like to share a letter with you that I received yesterday from Todd Speaker. And Todd is here with us tonight. Todd, just give a wave.
Everybody wave, Todd. Todd. Welcome, Mr. Speaker.
For those of you who don't know who Todd is, he is a successful businessman in the Bay Area. He is a lifelong swimmer. He never swam for Santa Clara Swim Club, but he has competed many times in our International Swim Center. In fact, he competed in the very first international invitational swim meet that we held in 1967, and he made finals too, so he was really good. Last year, in 2016, Todd was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame as the gold medallion recipient.
Yay.
We've been keeping Todd informed about this important project for many years, I think as far back as 2009. And a couple of weeks ago, Kevin Moore and myself met with Todd, and Starren Bird was in that meeting with us. And the letter that I'd like to read to you tonight, I received yesterday, and you're all hearing it for the first time. I wanted everyone in the room to hear it for the first time together, so no one has seen the letter except for Kevin and I. So here we go. Dear Cynthia and Kevin, at this time, I am pleased to inform the Silicon Valley Aquatics Initiative of my pledge of not less than $4 million.
Whoa.
In support of the new International Swim Center, International Swimming Hall of Fame, and the Community Rec Center in Central Park. As we discussed, I am looking forward to working out the terms of this donation with the SVAI and the city. Allocations will include funding for construction of this world-class facility, the establishment of an iShelf endowment, and the SVAI for ongoing operations and fundraising efforts. This community-centered project is a testament to the history, tradition, and unparalleled aquatics legacy of the city of Santa Clara, and I would personally like to thank Mayor Lisa Gilmore and the Santa Clara City Council and staff for their outstanding leadership and ongoing support. In closing, I would like to express my deep appreciation for the years of dedication and hard work of your SVAI team to make this new world-class facility a reality. I look forward to seeing it completed and swimming a victory lap with you. Sincerely, Todd Speaker. I'm not sure, Mayor Gilmore, but I think that may be the largest donation in the history of Santa Clara for youth activities and recreation.
I'm not even sure I know of anything that even comes close to that. Does anyone, many of us have been around 100 years, and I don't think we've known that. I'm speechless. That is amazing, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much for your interest in this project. We all believe in it very much, and to hear that a gentleman of your stature is interested in donating that type of money for the youth of our community is just, it's heartwarming and amazing. Thank you so much. Would you like to say anything, Mr. Speaker? Please come forward.
I will be brief, but I just
You can take as long as you like. Go ahead. Have a seat.
I've been in many council meetings where they do limit you, and I will be under whatever limit you impose. But I just want to ensure that the next generation has the same opportunity that I did. Thank you.
Thank you. We're so glad we gave you those medals back in 1967. Boy, it was worth it. Whoa. Well, thank you so much. I mean, Santa Clara has a swimming history. It's really one of the reasons we're on the map. as the youth sports capital of the world in Santa Clara, and I think you were a big part of that by participating in our international swim meets. I remember as a young child, when I was that age, in fact, I probably got your autograph. You used to go to those swim meets, and they had the booklets with the pictures and the swimmers, and my father used to drag me to those swim meets all the time, and I would spend time getting autographs of the winners, so I'm sure I have your autograph somewhere. So, this is just amazing. Anyone from the council? Teresa?
Well, I very much enjoy swimming too. I think it is a lifelong sport and avocation. And we were at a presentation last week at VTA on Complete Streets, a lot of our staff, and one of the overlays that they had was from the Centers for Disease Control, was a map of the United States that showed the incidence of diabetes and heart disease and all of that. And so then they had an overlay. They had two separate maps, and they had an overlay of levels of activity with throughout the nation. And it was very sad to see that the levels of the areas of the country that have very low levels of physical activity exactly correlate to rates of heart disease and diabetes, which are two of the most serious health challenges that we face. And I thoroughly believe that having access to sports like swimming or something that on a lifelong basis that can help people avoid getting those types of diseases. So I hope that Mr. Speaker will now be an inspiration to many other potential donors in our community that can support an activity and opportunity where many people in the community can pursue a variety of forms of physical activity and maintain their health.
Thank you, Teresa. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know where to start my thanks first, but I guess first and foremost should be Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much for your generous donation and contribution to this wonderful swim center. I got very emotional as soon as Cynthia read the letter. I've never heard of such a donation made to our city, but it just proves just the importance of this swim center to our community and to the people that are hearing about it. And as our city continues to be a world-class center, I mean, we've got a stadium now, we've got all kinds of activities coming in through the stadium, through soccer, through football, through all kinds of events. Now to have this, a world-class swim center to add to that and to have, your support is just so wonderful. What Councilmember O'Neill was just talking about, the importance of swimming and activities, having outlets like this. I mean, as people get older, and I'm getting there. Swimming is a nice form of activity that takes a lot of that pounding off your body, and it's a nice way to stay in shape and just keep active. So it's. Just what you've done is just such a testament to the importance of swimming and keeping healthy. But thank you, Cynthia and Kevin, for your connection, with Mr. Speaker and obviously making this awareness of this center to him, and so that he can be here tonight, and to everybody that's here as well, to support this effort, and to Richard and Tori, thank you for all your hard work. I mean, obviously, yeah, I agree, a lot of work has gone into this presentation, so thank you so much. It's been very, very informative.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan.
Thanks. I too thank Mr. Speaker. It's beyond generosity. I'm beyond words. To find the right words to say thank you, to really get this kick-started. I remember it's been several years now when Kevin asked me to serve on the International Swim Hall of Fame Committee along with Cynthia, when this was a dream, and I remember Kevin had another dream that came to fruition, so I'm sure that this one will too. It's been a long road to get to this point, but I really feel now, especially with this initial very generous donation, that we are at a real jumping off point, and that, yes, we will have a new swim center. It hasn't been renovated since I took swimming lessons there when I was this high. And so I'm very, very, very pleased, and thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Kevin, for all your hard work. I know without you guys, it wouldn't happen.
Thank you, Councilmember Mahan. And I think there's a lot of passion involved here because this is a project of passion. It has to be because as I think we're speaking, the price just went up $50,000 if I'm calculating correctly. So I think one thing that's really important is thank you, Cynthia and Kevin, for this. I mean, it's the first donation that's the hardest. And to have one of this magnitude is really so phenomenal. It's just, I'm getting emotional too about this. Thank you so much. We'll be proud to have that speaker name here in Santa Clara forever and ever. So thank you so much. So now we have to get this built. So since we have this, we need to move ahead. So are there questions of the team here for the presentation? I know it was a lot of information and a lot to take in, but are there questions? Councilmember Mahan. No, sorry. Oh, sorry. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, just once again, thank you for your thoroughness, and I'm glad that you've been able to reach out to the community and get their input. It's definitely, you know, since they're going to be a big part of it, we definitely need their input. The one thing I was just going to suggest going forward, when you do have the community outreach, to make sure you include the north side. There's a nice little library out there with a community room, and it's called the North Side Library. And I know a lot of swimmers out there that would love to be a part of the community input. So definitely come out to the north side. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Just a few questions. There was a few people that commented on the length of the questionnaire. Is there any way the second time you do this, you can drop that down a little bit from residents?
Yes, you know, we can work with the city however need be to ensure the length is adequate to your liking, and we'll work with the Parks Department as well to make sure that that is.
I think it was just a timing thing for them. It just seemed like it was long. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And you know, I think the next survey can actually be shorter, given that we tested more things in this survey, wanting to see how we could build a package, if you will. And now that we've done that, the next survey will kind of test that package in particular without all of those other elements.
Okay, and I also saw that you did cell phones and landlines. Was that equal?
No, roughly, and Santa Clara in particular is actually a much higher cell phone rate. But it's it's about 45-55.
Okay, yeah, because we know people love cell phones here.
Yes.
Okay, and you did ask them about would they financially support this if they knew that they were going to be somehow in a bond measure or anything like that. Did you feel that they wanted to support it, or because I was looking at your numbers and they were kind of close. So
they are, and you know, there is further data that we can provide through this as needed, and we did look at some of those items and can discuss that as needed, yes.
Okay, and do you have a timeline for the second phone survey, when you're going to do that?
We are looking in the fall, around September.
September,
yes.
Okay.
We're going to go do the community meetings, get feedback, and then move forward with the next polling.
Okay, and I know when we've done presentations here, do we have like storyboards for people to look at like throughout the city at the library so that they can understand what's going on? If you're not catching them on the phone, is it maybe a visual? Do we have like storyboards they can look at what it looks like, the process, what's going to be there? I mean,
Richard?
We are developing a project-specific website that is going to be open. It's going to have a lot of that information, a central resource. I think for the community meetings themselves, we're going to have different information at that point in time. I don't know if there's other ideas about leaving residents somewhere, but physically, but you know, that can be arranged.
Yeah, more of a visual thing, because if they see what you're doing, they get more excited about it.
Yeah,
so,
the website's going to have pictures from the previously approved design, so that's going to be able to.
And on your community outreaches, how many meetings were you going to have?
We're going to have 6 in total.
6?
So 3 in the end of, well, August, September time, and then 3 probably in the October timeframe before we wrap up in November. So.
And now that Mr. Speaker's raised the bar at $4 million, did you have any kind of idea of how you were going to approach that? I think that was the next part of the process, was the donation process.
Yeah, so that's the part that Stern is going to help lead, who's basically reaching out to 80 to 100 different donors, like Mr. Speaker. We're not expecting them all to be ready with
4 million?
4 million, but we're going to at least understand their appetite and interest, so that when we finish the study, we have a number or a range that we think we're confident that we can secure, and then the campaign would start, in earnest once this report is done. So, and Stern's going to be designing the, a campaign team and what that needs to look and feel like, and understand what the resources are to do that. But I can ask Stern to fill in any gaps. But yeah, and we'll be looking at naming rights as well and sponsorship as part of that.
Yeah, I think we talked about that naming right thing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. So I also had I heard some comments from the community that they found the phone survey a little confusing. As the questions went on, they got a little lengthy and a little difficult to follow, convoluted. So I was trying to think back as to, so if maybe that could be, I understand you now be more focused. But so is now the assumption that we are going forward, or we have a million miles to go for this point, but in the survey and the study, that we are looking at like going to the voters for some type of funding approval, a bond or whatever form it might be. Is that the direction we're now pursuing based on the initial findings?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a key part of the analysis, because we're not expecting that donations is going to cover this 100%, but we don't think any one source is going to solve the whole funding package in terms of the construction and ongoing operations and maintenance. So with the information that we get from the survey, that gives us, I think the second survey will give us more meaning in terms of thresholds. Right now we have a general direction of support, but we need to test more specific measures, and that's what Corey was trying to define in the next survey. So once we get that data, we'll have a better understanding, what potential tax measure could be supported with, measure next year. And that's going to be one option, but then we're also looking at the donation option as well. So we're going to have both of those variables to understand what the potential funding sources could be, as well as naming rights, as well as revenue from users and other elements of generating revenue at the project. So all these combined are going to give us kind of that range of feasibility, if you will. But the tax measure is going to be a key component of that, we believe, at this point.
Okay, so I understand the strategies for how you've put together a bond measure, having been involved in a number of bond campaigns myself. So when you're talking about like that it tests better if you're going to the voters with something, for those folks who don't have any interest in aquatic sports of any type, like the other items. So would we be looking at projects that are perhaps already on the Parks and Rec capital improvements program that, are not ready to be funded? We've had different talks about different types of facilities. Would we be taking or resurveying to figure those out, and would we potentially be looking at mixing together, because we have a park fee now, and I'm not even sure if the park fees can be used for a project such as this. But so I don't know if how we're looking at combining the park fees with a bond with, the various projects already in the hopper.
I'll let Jim Teixeira answer this one, I think.
That's a good question.
Very good questions, excellent. We've had a lot of discussion with our project team on this. Really from a Parks and Recreation standpoint citywide, there's a lot of things that the public wants us to do. This is one of those projects. It's testing fairly well, and what you see from some of the initial data is that a swim center first or swim center only is not what the public is saying. They're combining for the basic recreation as well, which is in this project. We're also doing the facility condition assessment with a different consultant, Kitchell, and they actually, PFAL was out there with them, and they went through Central Park, the International Swim Center as it currently is, and the Community Recreation Center and those elements. So when we're looking at funding and all the different sources, we want to make sure, and part of their task is fully fund the entire project so it does get built. So really, we're looking at that whole package, what's going to best meet the needs of the entire population, as well as bring forward a measure that can be funded by the entire population. So, yeah.
So as maybe as part of that measure then, Jim, because, you know, you and I've had discussions about this and we've talked about in general, that we're probably at a point or beyond a point where, like, our largest facility, say Central Park, needs to have a master plan to, you know, to design, to figure out, you know, how are we going to use that space? And then we have the upcoming park on the north side from portion of the golf course. So are you thinking that when we would go to the voters with something that we would perhaps at least have preliminary plans like this so that they would know, you know, what are we, overall, what is our direction, where are we thinking of
More
going?
from the idea, yes, and more from the idea that when people are saying that they want to see, I mean, we tested in it as well, and that's some of the additional data that is in this very comprehensive report. Sorry to the public it was so long, but it was very rich in that we did test things like the Creek Trail, which is in Central Park. We did test things like the playgrounds and, you know, the park amenities that people may want to see. They would support the entire project if they can see themselves in the project. Some people are more early childhood education focused. Some are more science or technology focused. Some people are more looking at you know, play and play value and other sports. So by testing that, we know where those elements rank among the general population. So we're able then to target the funding sources to those where people really want to support the overall project.
Okay, if I could indulge me one more question. So in the written report that was provided as part of the council agenda package, there was a fairly lengthy analysis of 4 different models, and each of those models had a different development model. So are we thinking that a bond or, you know, some other, you know, parcel tax, whatever it would be, would fit into any of those models? And, you know, you had kind of your scale of risk towards, say, the city. So whatever, like, tax measure or, you know, community funding measure or whatever that we might come up with, that would fit into any of those models, and we would still have to determine which of those funding and operational models would be the most appropriate.
Yes, and I'm going to definitely defer to PFAL on this, and they also have a couple of slides. I could even walk you through one of those, so you can see it's not just risk transfer, not just, you know, funding source, but it's a balance of those that gets the project built. So I'll defer to them on that.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yeah. I mean, the measure could be used in any of these different delivery models. So. In terms of actual one of the case studies, so the Pan Am Games, this is one of the case studies that we looked at. They actually, there was a partnership between this is in Toronto, between the federal, state, the city, and the university, and they actually share the different funding contributions. The state and federal agencies actually looked at financing the project, where the city and university looked to fund the project with different contributions. So these kind of different funding sources can be packaged up in whichever way is necessary, depending on the project, depending on the stakeholders involved, and you actually just look to structure the deal around that. So, you know, each of these 4 case studies had very different conditions and scale and funding needs, but each of them got done in their own way. And that's our job, really, is to kind of figure out what's the best way for Santa Clara based on the conditions that we know here. And this is why we're kind of doing this due diligence phase, but giving you the kind of confidence and knowing that, you know, there's models out there that work and have worked and are working. So we're going to bring all that together in the specific Santa Clara context. So.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I have a question about when you're looking at the swim center area, where it is now, where it would potentially be moved. Are you looking at Central Park as a whole, including, for instance, the library, which is a big part of Central Park? And if we're looking at a master plan of Central Park, are we looking at a master plan of the whole park only? Or are we going to be looking at the master plan of Central Park plus other park systems in the city?
Right.
Are you going to look at the different options?
Well, this is the scope, basically the product that was approved. In 2016 is the scope of our analysis right now. So basically it breaks down into these components. It doesn't include elements in Central Park that are outside this scope. And this 250 million is...
That's just
that's
the
these
element
elements,
of the
yeah.
approved project.
So it's not other elements of Central Park outside that, but...
So it would be, there would be an option for us to look, depending on which direction we go in terms of funding, to look at Central Park as a whole.
Yeah.
And maybe having the opportunity for maybe a library expansion or,
And
you know.
I think that's the...
Because we have library, we have lawn bowling, we have all sorts of programs in there that, you know, our goal would be to make everything, you know, better.
Right.
And more cohesive than what it is right now. But
I think the information that Tulchin kind of gleaned from their first phone survey is that the wider measure is more outside the project that's kind of defined here is going to get greater support. So, you know, I think Jim taking that information is going to look at the more broader pragmatic elements outside this particular project.
Yeah, I personally would like to look at a broader element, because if we're doing this whole new complex there, where does that leave the rest of the park? And I know there's parts of the park that people love and they don't want to see leave, and we don't want to see anything leave, but how can we make it better when you're moving the swim center from the back to the front?
Right.
And, you know, what the void that's back there, how are we going to make the best use of it with the other uses on there? And which leads me to just my next comment. I know we're coming to the end of our session, but there's a lot of misinformation out there right now, and I spend a lot of my time trying to clear it up as I go to the grocery store and wherever I'm going about, you know, are you taking this from the park or that from the park? What are you doing? So is there some, I know we'll have this report online on the city website, and I know you're talking about developing our own website for this project. Mm-hmm. Is there something simple we can put online on the city website that we can actually disseminate that says where we are in the process and what we've done so far? Mm-hmm. Something that just tells the story about, you know, we haven't made a decision to demolish Central Park and move this or that this is strictly what we're talking about.
Mayor, your staff can take the lead on that, working with the consultant.
Okay.
Yeah,
that would be, I'd like to see that,
just
to keep up to date as to where we are.
Yeah, I mean, our intent is
process.
to share all this information
Right.
and have a central resource so that there is no misinformation or everyone's kind of on the same page. So that's our key goal here, is to keep everyone as informed as possible. So
yeah,
that's
I
why
think
we're looking at a number of different ways to communicate as well.
What's important is to keep our community informed as to what we're doing. There's no surprises, and so they're a part of it. And the best way that we can do in terms of a communication plan to keep our community a part of this whole process, the better it will be for us in actually achieving success on this project.
Yeah, we agree.
All right, thank you. Is there any other questions of the council? All right, thank you very much. Let's go to the public. If we have any questions, Rod, is there any cards, comments? Would anyone like to say anything before we go on to our next item? Besides, thank you, Mr. Speaker, again. Make sure you're still here. Yes, okay. And thank you, Cynthia, Kevin, everyone from the swim club, everyone from PFAL, our staff, our very popular park staff. I hear that now. And city staff, is there anything else? Okay, thank you all very much. Until our next time, I think we're going to bring this up in September. Thank you. We are now going to adjourn to interviews. Thank you.
John, what about? Yes. I want to say